The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to the Formed Book Club. As Joseph Pearce, Vivian Dudro, and I, Father Fessio, continue our discussion of G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy, one of his most well-known books. And we're on chapter 4, The Ethics of Elfland, which is probably the most well-known and perhaps most important chapter in the book. Joseph, we're on page 55. No, wait a minute. We're on page 60.
Yeah.
Well,
60. I have 60, but
Joseph did that wonderful quote last time on page 59 about a man being more distant from himself than any star, and this idea of a man forgetting who he is, and so this need for things that awaken our memory as to who we are. And what I love about Chesterton's description of this is that it answers a question that has puzzled mankind for a long time, that, Plato himself believed in reincarnation as a way to explain this remembering oneself, or these aha moments. Like how could we be remembering ourselves, or how could we be recollecting things that were taught unless we knew them before, and how could we have known them before unless we had lived before, and so on. And there's another explanation for that same phenomenon.
Well,
And Chesterton has landed on it, that we are, he says later, we're all survivors of a shipwreck, we're all exiles from Eden, we're all, and that's the condition that we're in. And yet built into ourselves, into our consciousness, is this other reality. And it's moments like encountering a beautiful thing, or hearing a wonderful story, or seeing a person do a great and heroic act, where we are like a smelling salt, like a smelling salt. It suddenly wakes us up again.
Right,
to this.
What C.S. Lewis calls being surprised by joy, right?
Yes. So anyway, I'm grateful to Chesterton for supplying a different explanation for this same phenomenon that others before him resorted to other kinds of explanations.
If I'm understanding, though, I want to make the philosophical distinction that, Plato said, well, we've never seen a perfect circle, and we know what it is. So there must have been some prior existence we had in which we experienced a perfect, and we're remembering something, what we experienced in a prior existence.
Yes.
Whereas Aristotle would say, no, the perfect circle is embodied in the imperfect circle, and that we are able to abstract by the qualities of our mind that perfect circle from our experience right now of the imperfect circle. So I'm not sure how that relates to what you're saying with Chesterton here.
Well, it does relate, because as we know, Aristotle was the great corrector of Plato, even though he was the student of Plato. And so Christianity aligns with Aristotle's correction on so many points, as the great Thomas Aquinas went about to demonstrate. And so, no, that's beautiful. Thank you for explaining how Aristotle explained it, because that actually matches the Christian anthropology of man being made in the image of God, made for perfection in God, yet fallen in his condition, and yet somehow has in his consciousness some apprehension of the perfect.
That's right.
And he goes through the world judging himself and the world, and others too, by this standard. Well, where did this standard come from? And fairy tales have the standard embedded in them. The wicked are punished, the good are rewarded, the good are put to the test, and all the other lessons that you learn from fairy stories actually align with Aristotle's metaphysics and align with Christian theology and anthropology. It all matches.
That is true. I want to add, though, that there's a long tradition of Christian Platonists.
Yes.
Who maintain that Plato was right, that there are ideas, but they're not in themselves within the mind of God, and that therefore our knowledge of these universals comes from the fact that we are created by God, in whose mind are these universals, including our own particularity when he creates us, but that there's there is a sort of marriage of Plato and Aristotle
Yes.
in some of these Christian theologians. Yeah.
Yes, and that doesn't, because that doesn't contradict.
No.
The fact that the idea exists in the Logos,
Yes.
it's something which very much harmonizes with Plato, but the fact that we can only understand the idea of it's incarnated in a form, means that that Aristotle is correct, that we can only actually come to these ideas through the use of our senses, which means that there's an incarnate process that's necessary for us to access the ideal.
So when my husband read to our children when they were young, The Lord of the Rings, by the fireside and all this, and when he was finished with the third book, our younger son came into the kitchen with tears in his eyes that the story was over, number one, and that number two, he said, "Mommy, I just wish it were all real." And I said to him, it is real. It's real in the truest sense of the real. And, this is why we should read our kids great stories. You want to teach them metaphysics? You want to teach them theology? You want to teach them philosophy? You want to teach them anthropology? You want to teach them virtue? You want to teach them right and wrong? Well, the best way to get started is reading them great stories.
Amen.
Amen. Joseph, page 60.
Next thing I've highlighted, because I is page 60, it's on page 60, and it's about 8 lines down.
I know what it is.
The test of all happiness is gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt grateful, though I hardly knew to whom. Children are grateful when Santa Claus puts in their stockings gifts of toys or sweets. Could I not be grateful to Santa Claus when he put in my stockings the gift of 2 miraculous legs? We thank people for birthday presents, cigars and slippers. Can I thank no one for the birthday present of birth? I mean, this is glorious. It reminds me of another short sort of poem that Chesterton wrote, if I can get it right. Give me miraculous eyes to see my eyes, those terrible crystals made alive in me, more beautiful than all the things they see. And again, page 36 here, just to go back, it just says here, it is 5 lines up. It is impossible without humility to enjoy anything, even pride. In other words, there's a connection between gratitude and humility. If we have humility, we'll have gratitude. And if we don't have gratitude, we don't see that our legs are miraculous, that our eyes are miraculous, that our birth is miraculous. All these things just become taken for granted. We just don't value these miraculous gifts that we are living with.
Yes.
Right?
So that's why logically he began this discussion with this point about everything being startling, about everything not having to be the way that they are. It's, and so if you first stop taking things for granted, recognize how startling and wonderful things really are, and that should fill you with joy, and that is what causes the gratitude. And so these are all linked together for him. This first having the wonder to see the world as a startling, amazing place that could have been otherwise, and now to be full of joy and gratitude. I mean, these are the themes that he repeats over and over again, because that is the key to happiness right there.
Absolutely.
And what he's doing here is he's describing the 2 great principles he discovered. And we just finished on the first, which he summarizes in the new paragraph on page 60. There were then these 2 first feelings, indefensible and indisputable. The world was a shock, but it was not merely shocking. The existence was a surprise, but it was a pleasant surprise. So this whole idea of being at home and yet being surprised, so that's his first principle. Now, he's going to say at the end of that paragraph, there enters a second great principle of the fairy philosophy. What's the second principle? He says, a few lines down, the note of the fairy utterance is always, you may live in a palace of gold and sapphire if you do not say the word cow, or you may live happily with the king's daughter if you do not show her an onion. That's good. I mean, Good examples.
He's using startling examples because those are examples we're not used to, but you see how they could be really anything to still bring about the same result, which is there's a condition. Now, we all talk about unconditional love, and that's a reality of God too, that he loves his children no matter what they do. But if you break his rules, there will be consequences.
And so this principle is called the
Yes.
principle, he says there in that paragraph above there, the doctrine of conditional joy.
Correct.
You'll be happy if you don't do that.
Yes. So it's not that.
And then he gives on the next page some more sort of better known examples rather than the not giving someone an onion, which is obviously just both humorous and to surprise us. But so about a third of the way down of that page 61, in the fairy tale, an incomprehensible happiness rests upon an incomprehensible condition. A box is opened and all evils fly out. A word is forgotten and cities perish. A lamp is lit and love flies away. A flower is plucked and human lives are forfeited. An apple is eaten and the hope of God is gone. So these are well-known examples from myth and fairy stories and indeed the Bible, of course. These particular 2 pages are very important for Tolkien. So in his essay on fairy stories, he talks about this law of prohibition, what Chesterton calls the doctrine of conditional joy. And one of my favorite lines from that essay is, the locked door stands as an eternal temptation. The locked door stands as an eternal temptation. The reason is that the door's locked, but we're given the key, right? So, because the key is our free will. No, it's not as if the door's locked and we can't open it. The door's locked and we can open it, but we're told that we shouldn't. And that's this sort of relationship between our freedom to break the law. That's why it's a perilous world in which we live. Doctrine of conditional joy. But if we want joy, we have to obey the condition. But we don't have to obey the condition.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why Lewis was such a genius in Paralandra when he had Weston tempt the Green Lady, saying precisely, well, God gave you that law not to go on the fixed island because he wanted to have you have the opportunity to develop yourself and be independent and break the law. He wants you to break the law. I mean, that was diabolic, and of course Weston is a diabolic creature there. But no, God puts these conditions there because he gives us a test to be able to earn what he wants to give us. But that was I shivered when I read Weston talking that way to this beautiful, big, giant green woman.
Yeah, and yet God knows. This is the great mystery of sin and redemption. God knows that we are going to fail, and grace is now going to abound through the way made by our failure. But as Father pointed out in his homily today, quoting St. Paul, that's not a reason to sin more because grace abounds more. That's not a reason to sin more. But the good news is that even when we fail, all is not irreparably lost. And that God has a plan for our redemption. And so, we should be shuddering when we're handed that key and we're shown to the locked door. We should be shuddering, like, God, give me the strength not to fall into temptation. But,
to quote St. Paul again, we should work out our salvation in fear and trembling.
Right. And there is a great fear and trembling when you're given this grave responsibility. And you're happy. You will lose your joy. You will lose your bliss. Everyone's talking these days about your bliss. Well, you're going to lose your bliss if you open that door when you were told not to. And by the way, that was given to you for your own good. Right? Because all of these things in the stories and in the Garden of Eden itself have allegorical meaning, right? The fruit was the fruit that you would die. It's the fruit of death. Tasting evil is tasting death. And so it isn't like he's just toying with us. It's really true that if I eat the fruit, I'm going to die. And back to fairy tales, what does Snow White do? She eats the apple given to her by the witch. And she's warned ahead of time. This is not in the cleaned up versions of the stories. The dwarves warn her, do not eat the witch's food. And that's what's in Chronicles of Narnia, too.
Yeah.
Edmund,
the magician's nephew. Edmund.
Or Edmund in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Edmund, don't eat the witch's food.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. It's in all of these stories, and that's why we need to read the stories.
Right.
Well, I have 63 next. I don't know if any of you usurp that.
Nope, go for it.
That.
Well, I did 2 small things on 62. New paragraph at the top, 3 lines down. Such as seemed was the joy of man, either in elfland or on earth. The happiness depended on not doing something, which you could at any moment do. As you say, we have the key, Joseph, and which very often it was not obvious why you should not do.
Yes, so this is also a key thing, because we talk a lot about reason and natural law, being apprehended by reason and all that. But the thing about God's commandments is they can look very unreasonable indeed. Why can't I eat that apple? Why can't I open this door? You're keeping something from me. This is how the devil gets in, and so there is something that's being asked of us, even beyond our reasoning, and that is trusting in God.
Yeah, trust, exactly, trust.
Then in the middle of that page, and it seemed to me that existence was itself so very eccentric a legacy that I could not complain of not understanding the limitations of the vision when I didn't understand the vision they limited. So that's just point two, that the joy that's offered, the glory that we're given a chance to obtain is so beyond our imagination and understanding. Well, okay, if I can't understand that, I can also not understand why I can't have the joy unless I refrain from doing something,
And I just love his example, marital fidelity and monogamy, as being a test case of this, right?
Yes,
and
that's
is that where you were going?
Yes, the highlighted. I like that line 5 lines down on page 63. To complain that I had only been married once was like complaining that I had only been born once. And then a man is a fool who complains he cannot enter Eden by 5 gates at once. So this sense of ingratitude in the face of such blessing being the cankered fruit of pride.
Mm-hmm. But the example you mentioned is 4 lines down. For a man, keeping to one woman is a small price for so much as seeing one woman.
Yeah.
To complain that I was married once is like only been born once.
Yeah. Yes. It's a great analogy, and then it gets even funnier when he starts to compare this with the decadence of his era. The poetic, artistic, decadent movement, right? When he says,
where is this?
In the middle of 63, there, the aesthetes, right? He's talking about the aesthetes. The thistledown made them weep. A burnished beetle brought them to their knees. Yet their emotion never impressed me for an instant, for this reason, that it never occurred to them to pay for their pleasure in any sort of symbolic sacrifice. Couple lines. Men, I felt, might fast 40 days for the sake of hearing a blackbird sing. Men might go through fire to find a cowslip. Yet these lovers of beauty could not even keep sober for the blackbird. It's so great. It is so great to bring these guys down a notch. And of course, they were contemporaries of him, right? Or recent. There's an overlap.
Yeah, Chesterton's writing The Shadow in 1908. It's only 8 years after the death of Oscar Wilde. Chesterton was at the Slade School of Art in the early 1890s when Wilde was in the ascendant, was ultra fashionable. I would only say, because he mentions here, Oscar Wilde said, that's me just below where you just read.
Yes.
Oscar Wilde said that sunsets were not valued because we could not pay for sunsets. But Oscar Wilde was wrong. We can pay for sunsets. We can pay for them by not being Oscar Wilde. which is very good, but it's very good, but a little bit unfair, because one of the characters in one of Oscar Wilde's plays defines a cynic. A cynic is someone who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. So the thing about Oscar Wilde is slightly more complex. He knows that cynicism is bad. He knows that the sin to which he indulges himself is evil and wicked. And so that's why his art is almost always very conventionally Christian and moral, which we see in the picture of Dorian Gray. So, but what he's saying about the aesthetes in general is completely correct. That their ingratitude shows that they're actually, well, the word is poseur, right? They're pompously pretending to have postures which are not, they're not to be taken seriously any more than they should be taken seriously, because they're not being genuine. They're basically just being hypocrites and liars. But Oscar Wilde lived a double life. And he knew the difference between the two. He knew the difference. He knew Mr. Hyde was not as good as Dr. Jekyll, and he knew that Dorian Gray was a bad man. So, and that's why cynics know the price of everything, the value of nothing. So, I do want to be a little bit fair to Oscar Wilde here. I mean, he leaves himself. If someone leads with their chin, they should expect a left hook, and that's what Chesterton gives him there, is a left hook. He led with his chin, but I think that there's more to Oscar Wilde than meets the eye, shall we say?
Right, there's probably more to Baudelaire too. I mean, what starts out being an appreciation of beauty and all of that can become debauched and end in a life of dissipation. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they're hypocrites or posers, or it doesn't necessarily mean that when lovers of beauty end up going down the road of hedonism. It does happen. It can happen, especially for people who are so sensitive to beauty.
When we divorce beauty from humility, and so we start saying things like art for art's sake, that basically art for God's sake is the answer, right? To give the gift, the fruits of the gift given. That's true art. Not, art can do its own thing because it's its own boss. It's divorcing the fruit from the giver of the fruit. That's when the problems begin.
These examples Chesterton gives elicit in me a thought which is only tenuously connected to what we're saying here. But in contemporary West, for sure, maybe the whole world, a very common way of expressing contradictions like this, is memes. We have these memes all the time which point out these contradictions, they are, they'll love a blackbird singing, but they won't stay sober to listen to it. And I just had this thought that Chesterton really is writing a lot of verbal memes, is what he's doing. He has this way of poetically, in prose, but poetically juxtaposing these inconsistent things.
Yes.
That would make a great meme if you put it in a picture.
Yes, he's brilliant.
I don't know what the etymology of the word meme is, but for me, a meme is normally has an illustration. From illustration last time, but it's really an aphorism, isn't it? As what older people like me and Chesterton would call aphorisms. But normally an aphorism with an illustration. Is that what a meme is? But I don't know what the etymology of the word meme is. I have no idea.
It's a short for memory unit, is what it's short for. That's where the word meme comes from.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But it's an image with text that illustrates a contradiction. My memory is so bad. I mean, I see them every day, but I can't think of any particular one to give as an example. Thomas, do you have an example for us? No. Okay.
Well, the next thing I have is, I'm sure you have some for this, because I think that I can be sort of the bottom of page 66.
Oh, well, let's see. I want to quote this at the top of page 64 because it's a summary of what he's done.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
I always like to do that because he's so florid or so engaging in his examples, and so sometimes you forget what he's exemplifying.
Yeah, those are his 2 points.
Yeah,
right there.
I put summary there. So one line down or 2 lines down, depending on where you're going down from. I have explained that the fairy tales founded in me 2 convictions. First, that this world is a wild and startling place which might have been quite different, but which is quite delightful. What is quite delightful. So that's the first. Second, that before this wildness and delight, one may well be modest and submit to the queerest limitations of so queer a kindness. So those are the 2 principles. And then I actually had this whole paragraph, starting with the second paragraph, all the way there. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is philosophically very important. But go ahead. What do you have?
Well, and so now he comes out of the nursery with these 2 convictions, and he, as an adult, starts imbibing the atmosphere of the modern world and finds that these things are juxtaposed against each other and decides to go back to the nursery.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So
No.
it's 65. You're on 66, Joseph. That's your next thing? Well, 65.
My next is on 66, but 65, yeah.
65, about 2/3 down. This is good. The sun rises every morning. I do not rise every morning. But the variation is due not to my activity, to my inaction. Now, to put the matter in a popular phrase, it might be true that the sun rises regularly because he never gets tired of rising. His routine might be due not to a lifelessness, but the rush of life. The thing I mean can be seen, for instance, in children, when they find some game or joke that they especially enjoy. The child kicks his legs rhythmically through excess, not absence of life. Because children have abounding vitality, because they're in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, do it again. And again, I who have no children, but I spend time with families who do, I mean, the worst penance I can inflict on a family is to ask the child, do you want me to swing you around? Oh, yeah. I'll swing him around. Do it again. Swing around. Okay, I'm leaving. See you guys. And so the parents are left there having to swing the kid around for another hour or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
That just happens to be at a wedding and put me in bed for 2 days.
Well, that's right. That's right.
This kid wanted me to keep swinging him around, and I became a cliche, a middle-aged woman who hurts herself on the dance floor at a wedding. Yeah. This kid did not know when to quit.
For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony. But perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun. And every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but he's never got tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy, but we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we. And this, Joseph, relates to hexietas, this idea of Suarez, that every individual is unique, precisely because God makes that personally as God, and therefore, yes, they're individuated by material. This one's here, not there. But the real principle is God says, do it again.
And by the way, no 2 daisies are exactly alike. No 2 snowflakes are exactly alike. No 2
leaves.
No 2 leaves. No 2 of anything. Not even identical twins are exactly alike. And so this, what only a jaded, cynical person could start to see monotony in daisies. It's like, oh my goodness, every single one is different from the other one.
Joseph, you have to.
Oh, Thomas is giving us the signal.
Well, let's conclude with on page 66 at the very bottom there, because this book is about why he became a believer.
That's right.
The next paragraph, or in the middle, I guess we could say, this is my first conviction, made by the shock of my childish emotions meeting the modern creed in mid-career. I had always vaguely felt facts to be miracles in the sense that they were wonderful, because miracle is some word mirare, to wonder at in Latin. Now I began to think that miracles, in the stricter sense, that they were willful. I mean that they were or might be repeated exercises of some will. In short, I had always believed that the world involved magic, Now I thought that perhaps it involved a magician.
And the story led to the storyteller, which
Yeah.
is where we started.
Joseph,
Yeah.
Vivian, any more?
Well, what I was going to take up was maybe we can begin next time, but just from where you left off, Father, because I had this highlighted about the magic involves a magician, and this point a profound emotion, always present and subconscious, that this world of ours has some purpose, and if there is a purpose, there is a person. Had always thought life first as a story, and if there is a story, there is a storyteller. So again, here we see how the love of fairy stories ends up being a proof for the existence of God.
Good. We'll see you all next session, God willing. Deo volente, as we used to say in Latin. God bless you all.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.